Justin Lynch. I graduated from St. Joe's back in 2011. I was a computer science major with a German minor. Mostly took the German minor because I was able to roll in some courses from high school and finish that off pretty easily. I think I only needed a class or two after that. Um, so that's a little bit about me in terms of my SJU. So at SAP, I'm in the same role that I applied to when I graduated from St. Joe's. I'll tell you a little bit more about my interview process in a little bit, but I like to come back to St. Joe's and do different types of talks like this. I've done various platforms and formats from the career fairs to some of the CS department tech talks as well. So I'm happy to be here and share some of my advice and answer some of your questions today.
Great. So Justin, can you tell us about the first job? You said that you're in that role. Tell us about it, kind of some projects, tasks, and can you also talk about just SAP and what SAP, does on a more global level?
Sure. So SAP is a business software company. That's the easy one-liner. The fact that you're all here listening to me talk about SAP, you're ahead of where I was. So like I said, I was a CS major, and around this time in my senior year, I started looking for job opportunities. What I started seeing is SAP, 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 and now what I figured out is those were customers of SAP. So it'd say things like SAP analytics team member, SAP supply chain expert, SAP this, SAP that. And I started thinking, what is SAP? Did I miss an elective? Did I miss a course? So I did my research, realized that the headquarters is in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. So if you guys, were to go down City Ave and go towards where like the train station is at 69th and kind of keep going straight, eventually you'll run into Route 3. And then you go down Route 3, probably 10 miles or so, and you'd run into SAP. So I was like, cool. It's, somewhat local. I was originally from South Jersey, so still, somewhat in the area. I realized that they had a lot of early talent programs, so I applied to several. Um, when I say several, probably 5 or 6 different jobs that made sense for me coming out of college. I went down the path of an iOS developer interview process because I had taken it one of our, I think it was software engineering. We did a lot of Android development, and that was kind of what our whole project was around. So I figured I could relate that. So I went through a few phone interviews. I was waiting for the in-person panel interview. And then the role I'm in today, I think everything happened within a week and a half or 2 weeks. So I talked to HR, had a phone interview with someone on the team. They brought me in and I did a 2-part interview. One was a presentation about my favorite course, and then one was more of that technical interview. And let me kind of give you some insights into that. What I want to try to do is have you learn from my experiences because there were things I could have did a lot better. And I now realize that. So for example, on that 2-part interview, the first one was a presentation on what's my favorite class. So I picked, I think it was web technologies. It was a course that I was in. So my interview happened in the spring. It was right before spring break. So I'm what, halfway through the course maybe, but I'm presenting about how this was my favorite course. So my first slide, I put on, the key like 5 bullet points from the syllabus, and they asked me about it. So they asked me a question about something on the syllabus that we hadn't gotten to yet. I had no idea what this term or, what it meant. So I immediately like set myself up for failure talking about something that I didn't know everything about. So like, a good lesson. So think about like when you're putting things on your resume, if you put it on your resume, it's fair game. And like I learned that the hard way. The next part of that interview, like I was able to kind of get myself together and just say, like, honestly, we haven't covered that yet. And then like finished out that presentation. The next part of the interview was a technical interview. And the way it worked was like a good cop, bad cop scenario. So I had one person asking me questions, getting to know me, telling me about what he does in the job. And then I had someone else, like you can kind of imagine this. He was just sitting in the corner, not saying anything, like his arms crossed like this, just like listening to what I was saying. So I'm talking to the first guy, answering all these questions, and he goes, "Okay, enough with that. You wrote on your resume calculus. Here's a marker. Go to the whiteboard. Tell me what calculus is. Pretend like I don't know anything. Calculus was something I took freshman year. So I had to like try to recall all that and start drawing. And then, we had the electives for philosophy and theology. And like when he asked me about different classes that I took, started having me tell him about philosophy and one of the astronomers and all these things. All this wasn't relevant to computer science at all, and then he flipped into the computer science. So he was trying to see how I handle stress and kind of under pressure. So again, want to share that to kind of give you an idea of what that was like. So that's a little bit about the interview process and things that I learned. I can definitely tell you more about our interview process for the job that I'm also hiring for. But again, that was part of my journey. I interviewed for other companies outside of SAP. Phone interviews. I did an in-person interview as well for a few places. But yeah, so resume, whatever is on there is fair game. Definitely remember that. It's something that when I do interviews today for possible candidates, I'm looking for those things. So SAP was my first job out of school. The type of projects and tasks. So I'm in a service support area. So don't think help desk, but think more of our customers have a contract with us for elevated support. So they want more than those help desk tickets. So we're doing things like system health checks, system and project assessments, performance optimizations, volume stress tests, go live support. We're working on proof of concepts with customers. We're helping them on implementation. We're helping them do that upgrade. For example, these are all different types of projects and tasks that I do. So I started off on more of the health checks assessments, and now I'm a team lead for a data warehousing product that we call Datasphere. So I'm supporting customers on their adoption, but also positioning my team members on their services and engagements as well. So, I think I touched on a lot of those points, but let me know if I missed anything.
No, you definitely hit a lot of the points. Do you all have any questions based on something you just said? Okay. Um, so can you talk? You said that with the interview stuff, like these are some things that happened, and you might do things differently. What in particular would you do, differently, or how how knowing what you now know, besides maybe just tailoring your resume a little bit, in a different way, what would you do differently today?
Yeah, so I think the first part is definitely the resume tailoring and making sure everything I put on there is something I can talk in depth to. So that would be the first thing. Like for example, another one that I had, we had this Haskell programming language that one of our professors loved and taught us in one of the CS courses, and I wrote that on the resume. But it was very challenging, and even coming from the instructor was hard to pick up. If someone asked me questions about that, there's no way I would have been able to answer them well. So like that's not something that makes sense. I would kind of re-tailor my resume to emphasize things that I'm strong in and also projects that I know that I can go in depth on. So that would be something I would change. Also, like when you put your, a capstone project or you put something that like a final project in a course, don't think of it just from this is what the task was and this is what I did, but think about the next layer. So how do all these technologies work together? So if I give a simple example, say you put that made this website. So what was the purpose of the website? How did you do the front end? What did you code it in? When you have the back end, what did you code it in? And how do these pieces connect with each other? That's a really important part. So how are you sending calls to the database? How are you getting the response back? Some of these things may sound very straightforward and obvious, but I see this often in interviews that we're lacking that connection of everything that you did. So that would be one thing that I recommend, and one thing that I would have done better. I had a good high level discussion points, but not having the details or being able to answer all the questions is definitely hard for you in an interview, but it sometimes poses red flags for an interviewer as well.
Cool. So, do you guys have any interview questions, things that you think about, worry about, things that might come up in an interview? Right.
What technical questions were you asked when
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, what technical questions do we ask?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So kind of a general answer, then I'll give my specific answer. So, at a general answer, when you're looking at job descriptions, there usually should be something to give you an idea of what's to come. Some may be that you kind of take a technical assessment outside of the interview process, and others will be that it's a part of the interview process. So, in my role and what we're hiring for, we loop it into the technical process in the interviews. The reason we aren't looking for someone that's only good in Java or only good in C++ or only good with databases, but we're looking for someone that has different types of background. So you've worked with Java or you work with Python or you worked with C++ or you've taken a database classes and learned about, SQL, for example. So what we do is loop that into our interview process. So in a phone interview, we're probably going to touch on these things high level. We do 30-minute phone interviews. You only have so much time there to ask technical questions, so we'll do as much as we can. But on the same side, when we get to the 1 hour interview, if things progress, that gives us much more time to go deeper into technical questions. So we may pose a scenario, maybe something that we see customers where they're saying they're trying to, run a report and they're getting a 500 error. What do you do next? Or we may say, here's a scenario that we want you to write some pseudocode for, share your screen, write out the pseudocode. An important piece of advice there, you might not always know the answer. If we're posing a question from an SAP issue, you don't know the whole SAP layer to things. But what you do know is that there's a back end and a front end, and what are questions that you ask. And keeping that kind of train of thought going is really important. Same thing for pseudocode. We may post something to you and you're just like, I don't know, I can't remember this function I need to call or this, algorithm or how I should do this, but in my head, here's what I'm thinking. So often we get people that freeze because they don't know 100%, and then, nothing comes from that question. But if you don't know the answer, it's okay. But talk out what you're thinking, even if you can't get it into code. What is your thought process of how you're looking to accomplish that? That's, really, really important during an interview.
Just what I just heard is that the you all learning the candidate's thought process and how they might problem solve and how they might think critically is more important than them getting to the actual answer.
Yeah, like, to be honest, in most interviews, the pseudocode answer is not always 100% correct. But if I can see you're on the right track and you explain what you're trying to do, that's typically what I'm looking for. So don't let that, you think you forgot a brace or you forgot a semicolon or, whatever it may be. Don't let that, impact your train of thought during these types of technical questions. So to kind of get back to that original question, each kind of role that you apply for will handle it a little bit differently, but that's typically how we handle it for my job.
Okay. Um, let's move on, I think, from interviewing a little bit. What skills do you feel like are most important for students to have when coming out of college?
Yeah, this is a great question. So especially in the role that I'm looking to hire for, we're looking for the technical skills. So that gets, asked and figured out through some of the discussion that we just had. We look for analytical skills because if something is coming to my team where we're an elevated level of support, that means it's typically not the easy answer that gets a solution. So you need to have the analytical skills to put all the pieces together. Where are these calls coming from? Where is it breaking in the code? Why is it breaking in the code? And, to figure all that out. It's also the communication skills. So, it doesn't matter if I'm the best debugger on the planet. If I can't explain how I debugged, how I got to the issue and what I need to do to fix it, my debugging was worthless. So technical skills, analytical skills, communication skills, but then also being passionate about what you're doing. So the passion comes in because we, are working on cutting edge technology. We're seeing a lot of new features come in and we're seeing a lot of customers that are looking to adopt. So you need to have that passion to kind of put all the, technical skills, analytical skills, communication skills to use and be able to support the customers and all their questions and all the different services that we're providing. Similarly, being able to handle demanding environments. So, sometimes a customer is not happy that something isn't working well, or they've been working through this issue for 2 weeks and then it comes to you and, they're mad after having to work with this for 2 weeks and you're here in hour one and they're expecting a solution. So, handling those demanding environments and using all kind of your technical skills, I see all those things as like the package of skills that we need to be successful.
Uh, you have any questions?
So would you prefer that we deep dive in a topic or get familiarized with different tech stacks?
Can you, Scott? I got part of it. It was deep dive into a topic.
Yes, like, do you prefer like we should deep dive into a topic or like get familiarized with different tech stacks?
So you're just saying generally in your skills that you have, or when you're going through the interview process?
In general, what we have.
I think that's going to be, job to job. From my perspective, I want you to be able to be comfortable in a topic. So if you say that you're a Java expert, you should be able to answer all questions about Java. But also, depending how, the schedule works for your major, you might not always be able to take every single course that there is in Java. But if you have these different experiences and different hands-on applications, I think, there's going to be some level of balance where some areas you're stronger than others, and that's okay. It's not the expectation that you're an expert in every single thing coming out of school.
Uh, Anybody else at this point? Um, can you talk a little bit about networking and how students should network to try to, land a position like yours or a position at SAP or even like, at other companies, just kind of networking in general?
Yeah, so I think networking is always a challenge because there's some part on your side and some part on how it all comes together. So let me explain that. Obviously your the career development center is helping with things like the career fairs and those types of opportunities. So that's a little bit more known. I definitely recommend taking advantage of those as much as you can and going and talking to different employers. Partially the reason is in those scenarios, that quick 5-minute conversation, in a way, it's like a practice for a mini interview. So you get comfortable talking to somebody that knows none of your background. And personally, I think that helps for an interview. Also, you get to see what different companies do and what their kind of working model is and what their culture is like. I think through those types of discussions. So definitely take advantage of the career fair. It's something I wish I did more of. Also, when there are networking events, it's great that you're all in something like this, but take advantage of them and go to as many as you can. I know that sometimes, like this is, more convenient during the day, but sometimes they're at night, which is harder. But any kind of event that you can attend, I recommend. Um, Also, if LinkedIn is becoming more and more popular, and especially with where you are in school. Like if I look 5 years ago, LinkedIn was much less used than it is today. So you'll see opportunities for networking events on LinkedIn, even if you're not necessarily asking a lot of questions. If you're joining and better understanding what a company does, I think those opportunities are important. And also, when you're looking at a company that you're interested in, check out their website. Sometimes on the website, there are different networking opportunities, maybe at that location that they may be doing as well. So each company is going to do it a little bit different, and each company and their link to a specific university will also change how things are done. But whatever opportunities you can sync, I think the more you partake in, the more benefit you're going to get out of it.
But can you talk next about I mean, networking can lead to full time, but it also can lead to internships. Can you talk about internships, the importance, maybe, if you had had any, or kind of talk through that?
Absolutely. So internships I find extremely important for a few different reasons. So first one is you understanding what work you're looking to do. So let me give you my example for that. So I work at SAP now, but during my time at St. Joe's, in between sophomore and junior year, and then junior year and senior year, I worked at a pharmaceutical company. It was Merck, and in the IT department. So what I realized from that experience was a lot of takeaways. So first, their like internship program for the summer was very much focused on the bio and chemistry side because they're a pharmaceutical company. So a lot of the program-based things that they did weren't as relevant for me being in computer science major and working in their IT group. So like that was kind of a lesson learned for me that, maybe I could have found an internship somewhere else that was more tech focused, the company, and maybe I would have got more out of that. But I did my best to at least attend the events that made sense, etc. Second, by getting that kind of hands-on experience, I learned what I wanted to do. So they gave me a lot of tasks to help with. They were doing a database migration, and they also had me write develop some different programs for some of their outgoing reporting metrics. So I was basically on my own, would have a check-in with my boss maybe once, twice a week. So what I realized is I couldn't be a developer. I couldn't just have tasks to develop, a lot of code, go through testing process, and that's what I do day after day after day. That just didn't work with my personality and how I like to engage with people and ultimately work with customers. So what I realized is I needed something much more customer facing. And that's why I went for this role in SAP. Had I not had those internship opportunities, I may have ended up as a developer. In fact, I interviewed for a development role at Lockheed Martin, and ultimately it didn't work out. But I also realized during the interview that this was leading me in a path that I probably wouldn't be happy with. It may have been something I did for a year or two, but not long term. So internships definitely important for the reason of figuring out what you want to do, but also getting that kind of hands-on experience and seeing where, based on this, where do you think you fit? And there isn't anything wrong with the internship that I had at Merck. So if you do find opportunities like that, any kind of internship you're going to be able to learn from. Just looking at it being a pharmaceutical company, I maybe had to extend myself more than I would have at other places to take advantage of like what the program had to offer me, because a lot of the info sessions and things that they try to just generally give to interns there were more based for those bio and chem majors. So internships definitely important. And I think what we often think of is internships just in the summer, which is true because definitely at SAP we have what we call the IXP program, but it's the internship experience program where our larger cohorts of internships are going to be during the summer. But that's not to say there aren't internship opportunities, during the fall, during the summer, or during the spring, during even the winter, and it doesn't need to be full time. Sometimes there's part-time opportunities as well. So like seek those out and take a look if it's something that you can balance with your school. Obviously, school and your learnings is most important, and you don't want to overextend yourself. But there may be smaller opportunities as well. So through my internships, it was extremely helpful. But yeah, hopefully that answered the questions there on internships. But I'm happy to talk about anything else.
No, I think that that's helpful. We talked a little bit already about how sometimes an internship does tell you what you don't want to do, or tells you, okay, that's not the exact direction I want to be moving in. So, backing that up was like, hopefully,
Yeah.
pretty powerful.
And maybe I'll add one more thing. So
Yeah.
that is one of your most important talking points in an interview if you have an internship. Because when we look at your schooling, we'll talk about some of your projects that you do, but an internship is where you very likely went into something brand new, were kind of thrown in and given something to work on, whether it was a project setting up a cloud system, you were developing code, you were helping on a migration. More than likely you knew nothing going in. So that is one of your biggest talking points of, here's what I knew coming in, here's what I learned, here was how I actively participated, here's the extra work that I did to support the team or learn about what technologies were being used, etc. And then it goes back to that same point I was making about the project earlier. We want to know what technologies were being used, how did they all work together. Often get in internship discussions and they're not able to explain everything that they did. make sure you're kind of thinking and asking the questions, even if you have one part of the puzzle, what is everybody else doing? And, think about how all that goes together, because we will ask it during an interview.
There's a question. A lot of talk about interviewing today, which is important. You good? Yeah, James.
And is maybe also you remember how did you prepare for this job?
You hear the question?
How do you prepare? And
Yeah, yeah. So if you can talk about interview preparation for the job that you ended up, or sounds like you interviewed for a few different roles.
yeah, so first thing is know everything about your resume. And what I would even say is take it the next step of uh, almost like talking point preparation. So if you put a specific project on there, if you put a specific internship, think about it from this way. Like, we know nothing about it other than the words that are on your resume. So, for my example, someone would have said, tell us about your internships at Merck. Very general statement. So you want to have your points in your head ready to go of, here's the three things that I want to, emphasize as I'm talking out what I did. So I think that's really important. I think also when you look at the school side, what was kind of your flow in your track? So if you picked a specific minor, like I heard a few of you say data science minor, have ready to go. Why did you pick that minor, or what coursework does that add to your already existing major? What made you interested in those things? So, kind of being ready to already answer a question that the interviewers are going to ask, I think, as well, because we're going to start off very general. And then based on your, answers, we are going to, then ask more questions. So I'd rather you be ready to give us, those good talking points up front so we can get to the really good details, in the rest of the interview. Also, if you you put Python on there and you haven't touched Python since, freshman year, just refresh on it a little bit. Look at some of like those key, words and topics and phrases and things, and, maybe a project that you did just to kind of, have your memory fresh in that. That's also something I would prep on.
Yeah, I love your answer about knowing your resume. I think a lot of times students don't do that well enough. Like, you have to be able to tell the story behind the things that are on your resume.
Yep.
Right? That's really what was just said. So, if you change your major, tell the story behind that. Honestly, if your GPA is not where you want it to be, or not, like, if it's borderline what the company expects, be able to tell the story behind that, right? I had a tough transition my freshman year, and it led to low grades. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that I'm on pace to graduate with a 3.0, or I'm really proud that it's gone up every single semester since my first semester here. Like, others might look at it and go, why is it not so good? I look at it and I say, I'm proud that I am in school and I'm going to get to a place where I graduate on time. That's the story behind it. You have to be able to tell that story. Your resume is like the, the back cover of the book that somebody looks at and decides do they want to read it. The interview is getting in there and telling the story. Does that make sense for those that it sounds like you've done a lot of interviewing at SAP of candidates.
Yeah, that's 100% a great summary. And yeah, it may sound kind of obvious, but time and time again, I get into an interview and the details aren't there. And, it's also partially nerves, going into an interview. So if you're not having a good plan and based on your resume of what you want to talk about, and then you get nervous, it just, affects your, kind of composure and how you're, delivering your answers. But if you're ready to go on your resume, you're ready for anything that we're going to ask. So, being able to tell that story, and, like what was just said, we only know what is on that resume. That's all we have. So we're going to ask questions, but you have all the details and the background and the history, share those things. And it's exactly like if, you have a lower GPA, for example, but you explain what happened, that's the type of thing that we're looking to understand versus just seeing a 3.0 GPA on a resume.
Can you talk about SAP's kind of dedication and how they demonstrate the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely. So if you were to be having a presentation from our HR team, they have a lot of different slides that go in depth about all the different awards that we get from diversity and inclusion. It is a huge idea and thing that we're always working on at SAP. So especially, women in leadership positions, that is something that there is a lot happening and has been happening. We do a lot of events around diversity and are included in events, throughout the country in terms of diversity. So, SAP is looking for different opportunities and to get different types of feedback on how we can always be better. But it's something that we're, constantly working on. So I don't have all the, super details about, each of the programs that we're involved in and all the efforts, but I know that from the inclusion and diversity aspect, it's something that is, one of our key pillars as a company from SAP, and something that we're constantly looking to improve on.
So Nick, one of our students submitted, I think, 2 really good questions. Nick, I'm just gonna go ask them, unless you want to. Okay. So the first is, knowing what you know now, would you have changed your major or added a second major or a minor? And if so, what would you have done different?
Okay, so knowing what I know now and where I ended up, I would have stayed a CS major. What I think I would have done differently. So I told you that I got that German minor basically because it was easy. I just needed 2 more courses, but I haven't really used that at all. The only place it's come in, like we are, our headquarters is in Germany. So every once in a while there's a document or a note or something in German and I can 20% maybe understand it. So, it hasn't been that useful. I think that I would have rather used those extra courses and I think I may have had another elective or 2 where I picked, some other courses. I wish I would have used that more to prepare for, what I'll see in the workplace. So things like public speaking and presentation building and those types of things. So in my job today, I'm speaking with customers all the time. It was a bit of a learning curve to get comfortable with that and get ready for that. And also, we do a lot of summary reports and deliveries via PowerPoint. Although we use PowerPoint all the time, in the CS major for different presentations, I wish I had to do it for things outside of CS, to prepare for those types of things as well. So getting myself more comfortable with presenting to different customers and audiences is something I wish I would have had a course or 2 about if possible.
You want to follow up, or is that answer your question? Okay. And then the next question, I'm going to add a little part to it. Is the direct question: is there any part of your job that you dislike? If so, what is it? But I would love to know also, what do you enjoy the most, and what do you dislike?
Okay, so my answer actually covers kind of both. So what I like about this job in this industry is everything is changing with what we're seeing in cloud deployments and how easy it is to add things. So new features and new rollouts versus, on-premise systems. The customer might not get a new version for years. So they might not install that new version for years. So 2, 3, 4 years before they're getting new features. So what I like about the job is that things are always changing. However, that can make it difficult because things are always changing. So I'm never knowing 100% of everything about my product, for example, that I'm supporting. So there's very often times where a customer goes to an SAP conference. The next week I'm working with them and they say, I want to work on this. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, this just got announced last week. I barely know anything about it, but that allows for me to continue to ramp up and learn new things and work through these challenges. And I've learned it's okay to say I don't know that answer, but I'll work on it and get back to you, and then we can work on this topic. So, it's kind of something that I like because I like to be driven. I like new things and new opportunities. You heard me talking about I could not be a developer because for me, I can't do the same thing every day. So the way that our customers use our products, while we may overlap on product capabilities, the way their different organizations work means they use our products a little bit different. So, that is something that, really keeps me driven. What I, like about the role, but I also find challenging. Furthermore, I like that I get to work with different groups and different people all the time. So, for example, I'm doing a webinar series and 7 webinars about our Datasphere product that are going, all throughout the world. And I'm collaborating with a colleague from Germany, another colleague from Netherlands, a few here in the U.S. So I'm getting to work with people all around the world and learning about their backgrounds and their experiences, and we come from different parts of SAP as well. So even within my group at SAP, we are, working very closely together. Like I said, I'm in data warehousing. We have databases, supply chain, finance, order to cash, cloud technologies, different database teams, etc. So like we're all kind of working together. So when I have a question, I go ask somebody. When they have a question for me, they come to me. So I really like the collaboration in the job as well. So those are just a few that come to mind.
Okay, another student, Anthony, asked a question, and the question directly is, how would you describe the transition from senior year of college to your first year working? Were there events that were helpful, hurtful, during the transition? And I guess more than like the technical day to day, can you talk about even like the difference of being a college student versus working and along those lines? Anthony, is that kind of what you meant? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is a great question. So, and it's something you can look out for in the interview process. I think it's a good thing to ask. So, you're looking at your schedules now, you're, going through your courses during the day, maybe you have some gaps and breaks, and then, at nighttime, you're often catching up on homework and things. So it's all around studying. And if you look at, the way the courses work, you have your semester, and typically that's it in that topic. Next semester, you're picking up something new. Maybe you're building upon that last course. So it's a pretty significant transition because now you're going Monday to Friday, likely 9 to 5, some, maybe a little bit early, a little bit later, depending. So what I definitely recommend is take advantage of if you have a gap in between to kind of reset yourself and get ready for that new schedule. For me, the way I set up my courses, I always started really early. So I could try to like get my day done midway through the day if I could. And then I worked at the IT department. So I'd work there like in the afternoon and then in the evenings. So it was kind of a shift. Like the waking up part, for work was easier, but now there's a commute. I lived a few blocks away from St. Joe's, so I could just, leave 10 minutes before class and be early. Um, so that was kind of a shift. So back to like what I would ask in an interview. So in my role, we had what was called boot camp, and it was about 3, 4, maybe even 5 months of all training. So in a way, it was almost going through another semester, but like very detailed and focused on, certain areas. So I would definitely ask like, what is the ramp up like? How do you, ramp up your new employees? Is it, do you have courses that we go through? Do you kind of get thrown in and have to figure it out, on the job? So for us, and we still do that today, even with the hiring that we have that just started, they'll all go through a 3.5 month, set of courses to teach everything you need to know about SAP.
That help? Okay. We have just a couple more minutes. Do you all have any additional questions? Yeah, James, nice and loud.
So back to that point, would you say it's pretty common for you for it not to be necessary to know everything because the company you're working for will let you teach you what they want to know at the time?
Can you help the Zooms
Yeah,
that way?
so the question is outside of SAP, right? Like other companies, how common do you think that onboarding and training is? Really, like how much information does a new, just out of college employee have to come in with versus how much is going to be taught to them once they get there?
So it definitely will vary. I've talked to some people that said they get a week or two of training and then that's it. I've talked to other people that their program is much more like ours, where we invest several months into your ramp up. So you will kind of see, both sides. If you look at development side, especially, um, you really need to like learn their kind of framework and their process. But if you know the programming background, maybe that's easier to jump in. But when you look at something, you can compare what I do to consulting. We are a little bit different, but now you need to learn products, technologies, delivery methodology. So something like that is going to be a little bit longer of a ramp up. But I also have heard some consulting companies where they give you a week or two and then throw you in and you're kind of working with more of a senior resource, and like that's part of your ramp up. So it's definitely going to vary in the industry, based on the company.
And all that, like, you can ask about what's the training, but
Yep.
I mean, I think it's good to ask in the interview, but if you get made an offer, you then can really get more in depth about what's the training, what does it look like, all of that. And then the question I would ask too is, what's your like 6 month and 1 year retention rate with new college hires? And if they tell you it's a pretty poor percentage, what that would say to me is they're bringing on people, maybe that training's not great, something's not right, and then they're leaving pretty quickly. Versus, like, do people stay and progress and all that stuff? But there's a difference between, I mean, you could ask that in the interview, but that's probably something I would ask once I made an offer. And now the ball's in my court, and I'm trying to figure out, is this something that I want to take? Is that, would you feel that way?
Oh yeah. And I really like when I get that question. So I get it worded a little bit differently, saying like, what is the growth potential within this role? But if you were to connect that question to saying like, well, you talked about the boot camp, and then what happens after boot camp. So I think that's an excellent question, because one of the things I think is also important when looking at your future, employment is, what is that room for growth? So for my example, everyone goes through boot camp, they get placed on a team, they shadow on their team, and ideally somewhere between 6 months and a year, they're delivering these different health checks and performance optimizations and all those services on their own. um, and then you can grow within the role. So I didn't have to leave a different part of SAP to become the team lead that I now am. I was able to keep kind of progressing within this role. So I started off as an associate, we called it support engineer at that time. Now it's a business process consultant. Then I became a regular support engineer, then a senior, and now I'm at an architect level. So I think that's an excellent question to ask about the training, but then also tie it to the growth, to continue to move up and take on more responsibilities. Can I stay in this role and do that, or do I need to move elsewhere? I think those are great questions for an interview.
What's one piece of advice you wish somebody had given you when you were in school?
So it's kind of a collection of everything that we talked about. I was very shy and not outgoing, so going to different events did not make me comfortable. But I wish that someone kind of gave me the push to make more of the career fairs, to make more of the networking events, um, to go through different interviews. Interviews I think is really helpful to make more use of the Career Development Center. To be honest, may have went in there once or twice my whole time at SJU. Also, like the interview side, we know that you're nervous, but don't let your nerves impact your how you're going through the interview. So if you're nervous, let us know. We can often help you feel better during the interview process. I always was kind of worked up going into an interview, and it would take me 10-15 minutes to kind of get calmed down and get in the flow. So if you're nervous, say that. We're talking back and forth, in an interview, and we want it to be a good experience for you as well. So make the most of all these opportunities, because it will help you, excuse me, kind of feel more comfortable once you get to the interview process. And again, know your resume so you're comfortable with explaining it there. So kind of a summary of everything that we talked about today.